Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering from ELD's Time Vault Games. This is the finals of one of our weekly events. You're going to want to stay tuned till the end of this one. We have one of the more controversial plays that we've ever seen on camera. Chalice of the Void leading out for Aiden, putting him in very good position versus Tony's The Epic Gamble, a deck he's worked very hard on, taking it from Ruby Storm through a series of evolutions. Current iteration is putting up excellent results for him. Retrofitter Foundry will allow Aiden to go wide or create some pretty big threats. These Thopters that Sai is going to create are going to be upgraded by the Retrofitter Foundry. Grim Monolith for Tony, kind of a delayed Dark Ritual in a way. Invest some mana, and then you get to untap the next turn and still have access to it, potentially accumulating over the course of multiple turns with multiple Grim Monoliths. It can really put you outside of range, of course, of things like Daze, but allow you to make plays like playing Defense Grid and continue on with a lethal line. And it can be a bottleneck for this, especially when they've got a Chalice at 0 that's going to shut off your Lion's Eye Diamonds, your Lotus Petals, Mox Opal, Chrome Mox. Sai is going to turn all these excess 0 drops at least into 1/1s. Chalice a little less one-sided, and Tony's just going for it here. He's got a Defense Grid out. Aiden does not have access to counter magic while he is tapped out. Burning Wish. Grab and empty the Warrens. Making a whole bunch of guys. Takes the opportunity to upgrade a Thopter into a 4/4. Make another body. Continue to make 1/1s, or he can upgrade his existing Thopters. Decisions to be made here. Right now, there are 3 potential blockers. Got 4. So yes, he makes a token, blocks with it. Down to 10. Empty for 7. 14 goblins total. 10 left to handle. Aiden looking to stabilize. Takes 6 more, blocking 4. 6 goblins left with 4 life. It's like he may have stabilized here. Make a 1/1, take 3, go to 1. Plays an Ancient Tomb. Not going to be useful this game in all likelihood. Sitting at 1 after this next attack if he's got no other cards in hand. When he sends 3 goblins get through, 3 goblins left on the other side of the board. Perfect top deck there. Thoughtcast. And some more bodies. Another Thoughtcast is exactly the type of stuff you want. Going wide and can probably start getting in on the offensive here. There's only 3 bodies that he needs to keep back. Go ahead and send a 4/4 here. Wow, actually not opting to attack. There are only 3 bodies. Upgrading Opters to constructs. Really, from here, it's just a matter of making sure that Tony doesn't find the Grape Shot in his sideboard. Tendrils of Agony, don't think is a possibility with his list, thanks to Chalice of the Void shutting off both Lion's Eye Diamond. I mean, really all of the 0 casting cost artifacts. Now, Aiden could actually get rid of the Chalice with Sai. If, for example, his hand clogged up with a ton of zero casting cost artifacts that he actually wanted to get full value. If he had another Chalice in hand, he could potentially go ahead and sacrifice it, play all those zero drops, and then replay another Chalice at 0, close the door behind him, though that's pretty theoretical at this point. You may be better off having a Chalice at 1, or even a Chalice at 2 to stop that Burning Wish. Multiple constructs. 4/4s can turn sideways. Emery, also a blocker, but a engine of value. Goose tightening around Tony's neck. He's basically got this one turn. He's got 2 goblins. He does chump block to go down to 2 goblins, allowing him to activate this Ancient Tomb. Pretty much just going to do something. Now, Aiden doesn't have access to counter magic here. This Ancient Tomb would kill him. Couldn't force a will from 1 to any useful effect anyways. You can pay the 1, but then you're very dead, so probably better to let the spell resolve. A Horn of Bergi. This is making it interesting. Harnfell? Yeah, Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. Bergi's flip side. Gonna turn any of these cards in hand into additional cards. Oh, that Lion's Eye Diamond would be so good. Chalice just absolutely crucial here. Devastating. Yeah, plays an LED. It gets countered. That's a wrap. I mean, you might as well throw it out there. Your opponent might actually miss the trigger. That's the only way of getting back in there. Yeah, there are some interesting tricks to get past Chalice of the Void. My experience, you want to kind of take things into a realm that's not mechanical. Like if you're using slang that people have to decipher. For example, when Gitaxian Probe was in the format, I would almost always get it by Chalice, mostly because I wouldn't throw it out every opportunity. I'd throw it out when it could be the difference between winning and losing. And, you know, you just throw it out there and be like, what you got? Like, you know, something slang-wise of, let me see what you kept, and they would reveal their hand, and at that point, Gitaxian Probe is resolving. And, you know, you're just kind of using different parts of your brain there. It's not the magic mechanics and rules. It's trying to decipher, you know, kind of a different linguistic question, and that's pretty brutal. Gitaxian Probe was one that I could sneak by pretty often. Also, anticipation at the end of games before. I have called for top decking brainstorm, or said I need to brainstorm into the nuts and put it away in a dramatic fashion where you're going to be revealing the top cards of your library as you draw them. And, you know, that's something people can get swept up in as well. So, I mean, it's a pretty low percentage, and those skills aren't really going to translate into the top 8. I'm not going to lie. Those are more for your typical Swiss rounds. It's not as likely to operate in your favor once you're playing the very best players left in the room with the big money on the line. I mean, I suppose there's a chance that they're going to be exhausted after a long day of playing, but very often that just makes people more cautious rather than kind of flying by the seat of their pants and kind of making the plays that feel natural. They may be aware of the fact that they've got to slow it down because they're not at their best in the top 8 after a super long day of playing Magic. It's a long time for shuffling. Probably could have skipped over a lot of that. But you do not want to go away here. The end of this video is going to have a very interesting play. Some may call it controversial, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. Tony, Rite of Flame into Rite of Flame. 4 mana, down to 2 Grim Monolith, Overmaster. And an Empty the Warrens, uncounterable. Empty the Warrens. This is going to tie in to the next play here. So, Tony, casting Empty the Warrens. Storm trigger on the stack. I will ask both players the next time they're in if they recall this interaction. Now, if that storm trigger has resolved, Aiden can Force of Negation one of the copies. If the storm trigger is on the stack, Tony's getting 10 goblins here, which wouldn't be accurate. If the storm trigger is on the stack, then the only target for Force of Negation would have been the original Empty. Wouldn't be able to be countered. So it would actually be exiled right now. They're on to the next game. This is what we've been waiting for. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead. So Aiden's on a mull here. Has the play. Ancient Tomb. Mox Opal. Lotus Petal. Bauble. Bauble. Sacrifices both baubles, shutting off his Mox Opal to draw 2. And he sees an LED. Tony leads out with that LED. The cat's out of the bag. Be going for it here. Mox Opal, a pair of LEDs. Incredibly powerful opening here. Considering his options. Got a Burning Wish. Tracking both LEDs, putting an Echo into the bin. We can spin the wheel with an Echo. All in on an Empty the Warrens. Bit of mana. Here we go. So 2 mana floating, and we've got a Flusterstorm. Now, this is where things are going to get interesting. And I am looking forward to hearing the comments. Empty the Warrens, put on the stack. The trigger put on the stack, passing priority. Aiden then plays Flusterstorm. Now, the argument here is that Flusterstorm is played in response to the trigger. So Flusterstorm is played, targeting the original Empty. Then there's a trigger for Flusterstorm to put its copies on the stack. All of those copies need to target either the Flusterstorm, which help you, or the single Empty that's on the stack. Those copies haven't actually been put on the stack yet. That's the contention. Now, that type of shorthand you wouldn't typically see at like an F&M, but that's where we are here. A Empty the Warrens up against a Flusterstorm, and we have a whole pile of Empty tokens. Now, the interesting thing is in the previous game, we need some context because a Force of Negation did counter a copy. So it would be very interesting if that kind of language or that trick, as some people might perceive it, would work in game 3 if that same rule was applied in game number 2. So I'll be talking to both players and doing a follow-up video on this particular interaction because it's really interesting. It's a very precise thing with that Empty trigger on the stack, the ability to stifle or trick bind or whatever other effect you might have to end the turn, etc. That is your opportunity to interact with the trigger. Once the trigger resolves, then all the copies are put on the stack, and then you might choose to interact with the copies in the case of Flusterstorm or any other counter magic. But that is how this one played out. Empty the Warrens, got past a Flusterstorm, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it. I can assure you, from a high-level judge perspective, you kind of just goofed if your opponent puts the empty trigger on the stack. Now, it's all you need to do is say resolve the trigger and then propose a Flusterstorm. Like, you can do that. Technically, you don't have priority after letting the trigger resolve putting the copies on the stack, but you're allowed to propose a shortcut, and your opponent can agree to that at that point. So that's kind of the nuance there, the slight difference in letting that trigger resolve or responding to the trigger. You do need to expressly say that the trigger has resolved and that you're going to copy the counters. You're going to counter the copies. With Flusterstorm, it's also tough because you can play the Flusterstorm, and unless you say targeting one of the copies, you really don't have an argument. If it was Mindbreak Trap, it might actually be different because you'd say that you're trying to counter all of the copies, and those copies aren't actually legal to target yet. So that could cause a little bit more. I would recommend, if you're ever in this situation, though, and you handle it in a slightly inaccurate way that is not getting the results that you want, go ahead and call the judge. Like, definitely get the judge involved and sort that out, because it may end up working in your favor. There's really no harm that can come from that. At the very least, you find yourself in territory that you don't quite understand or it doesn't play out the way you expected, the judge may be able to explain it even more to make sure that you're really on the same page. But it might also just go your way. The judge might also just see it slightly differently than your opponent, who may not have your best interests in mind.